And we should be going live in just 1 minute.
And I always start my stream off of your stream, so I have to wait for yours to start.
Okay. And we are live. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to California Free Radio. We are streaming live as we always are on X, commonly known as Twitter, on @NetterMike, streaming live on LinkedIn, streaming live on Facebook, on our public groups too, which I'm going to 1 second rebuild California. So hold on, because I did get a few complaints last week that I forgot to do the rebuild California stream. So I'm going to fix that right now. And here we go.
Hey, good night or good evening, everybody. You haven't posted on LinkedIn yet either. What's with that?
New post on LinkedIn? Well, that's shocking. Hold on here. We're on LinkedIn. I can see me. Can you find me on LinkedIn? I see me on LinkedIn.
I refresh my page. Hold on.
Well, now that we've started the show with a bang, let's start with take two for everybody out there. Welcome to Behind the Scenes. This is indeed California Free Radio. I'm Mike Netter, accompanied by Scott Piotr. Kurt English is on his way to Washington and not for a J6 crime. He's going for this big event that's taking place next Monday. Tonight, for everybody out there, on a quasi serious note, very serious note, our heart is out from us and our team to those that suffered the disasters in the Los Angeles area from the California wildfires. And we're going to focus tonight on what you can do about it if you had your house burned down, even if you were removed from your house for a little bit or had partial damage. This is a show tonight. Scott's going to be interviewing me where I'm going to speak from the heart, but I want you to pay attention. And when I say speak from the heart, that's because my house burned in San Diego in 2007. And there are not a lot of people that you're going to meet whose houses actually burned have been through the experience of recovery and can give you some pretty good advice as to what you can do about it. Now, I realize in general we are a political show. So Scott is primed to ask me about my sweatshirt that I'm wearing tonight. That's your cue, Scott.
Tell me, Mike, why do you have that sweatshirt on tonight? What does it mean to occupy
Well, it means
inbox?
for starter, it's a bit cold, but outside of that, Scott, Occupy inboxes because Netter News this week, and we put out a number of editions with my fabulous editor Tara, which should occupy your inbox and you subscribe to, is a lot of what we normally rant and rave about. What has been going on behind the political scenes, the lack of water, the ineptness of Gavin Newsom, the silence of Karen Bass, all this we are going to cover, but not tonight. So let my Netter News and even Scott's the newsletter that he puts out occupy your inbox so you can get this information and spread it. That's why I picked this particular attire tonight. Now, this week, Scott, I've had the pleasure of being on One America News, Real America's Voice. I've done a number of radio shows, etc., etc. But you know what part of the challenge is?
I give up what?
Well, one, I'm not that good looking, but that point aside, they give me a short segment, 6 to 8 minutes at the most, to talk about what we really need to talk about tonight, where I want to go in deep on what you can do if, again, if your home is partially damaged, even if you were asked to evacuate, and certainly if your home is burned down, from a practical point of view. I just don't get a lot of time on these major TV shows or even short radio spurts to really talk about it. Scott, tell
Okay.
everybody out there what you do for a living. Go ahead.
I just say you started out the show saying that we're not going to make fun of Gavin Newsom or Karen Bass, but that's really not fair. We need to do that. But I agree with you. We spent all last week making fun of their ineptitude, and obviously we weren't trying to do that to rub it into the poor people who actually lost their homes or been impacted by this thing. But they need to understand who is to blame on this whole thing. And it's not God with the winds. It is ineptitude in the way that they manage the brush areas, the forests, if you will, and then how they were ill-equipped to fight them when it did start. And it's put over what 12,000 people now homeless and over
No, no, no,
75
hold
dead
on.
so far.
12,000 homes burned,
Well, that's
and God
true. We're
forbid, 29 people lost their lives. There's an average of that's at least 36 to 40,000 people, probably as many as high as 50 in these big homes that have been displaced permanently.
makes total sense. You're going to have a lot of people, and we already have a housing crunch, and it's not like these houses are going to sprout. So, as to your other question, I'm an architect. I do architecture and construction, and I'll tell you that if you were to come to me today with a nice pristine lot and say, "Hey, I want to build a new house on this lot," how long is it going to take me? I'll tell you, it will take you at least, let's say you have your mind made up, you know exactly what you want. You're not going to be indecisive, and you're not going to go down to the local store and figure out and measure the furniture that you want there. You have everything nailed down. At the earliest, an architect is going to take probably 4 months to do construction drawings. More realistically, probably 6 months. Then on top of that, you have to get permits. Permits easily could take 6 months by themselves, and that's just for a building permit. And that's assuming that you don't have any zoning issues or anything else. And obviously, in our situation here, well, let's just continue that timeline. So optimistic, you can be ready to construct with permits in hand in about 10 to 12 months. And then it's going to take you about 12 months to build it. Because in effect, even though you have a tract home, maybe you're replacing it with the exact same tract home, it's a custom home now. You're building one. And so it's a 12-month construction period at least. So you're talking 2 years if you had a pristine site and you came to me today, but you don't have any of those things. First of all, your
So,
sites are what? They're messed
so
up. Tell
let's
us,
start with
tell us how badly they are messed up.
let's start with something that I did, which was a mistake right out of the bat. I called someone like you. Now that sounds very strange here, Scott, and this is a little bad for business
Hey,
when
wait
you
a
tell
minute.
everybody.
Are you trying to malign architects? No,
No,
never mind.
not architects, but my point is your first instinct when something happens is to rise from the ashes, and I called mine the crash site, and rebuild immediately. In the meantime, though, what you have to do is I want to walk you through some phases because we did call an architect, but then we stopped calling an architect because we realized there's lots that needs to be taken care of first. Look, let's be real out there. For most of you, you've watched disasters on television, you've watched them in the movies, you see things taking place somewhere else, and all of a sudden, for a lot of people out there, and again, somebody you know if you're in the LA area or even not someone you know, you're in the movie. This has actually happened to you. There's no cut, take, back to your regular life. There's things which
No,
need to be done.
no special effects on this one. Your house is
Nope.
gone.
So
And
let's
like I said, 2 years from the time when you come to me with your mind made up and a perfect site to build from. But you tell us now, how do you get from the point of my house is destroyed to the point of the site's cleaned up, I'm ready to hire an architect to proceed? That's
let's
not an easy process.
no, but let's start with some basic things. For starters, the press or the mainstream, which I'm part of, right? They talk about a lot about the people, and I get it, the 1 out of 10 that don't have insurance. But most of you out there have insurance. And the problem becomes, and I even talked to a couple insurance agents about this. And by the way, in Red State, I had my first of some articles published this week talking about, so your house is burned. Now what? right? We're not talking about the 9 out of 10 who have insurance. And Scott, let's be honest, most of us aren't really haven't sit down on a Tuesday night and read our insurance policy. It's just not something we normally do. Nothing
Well,
goes on
if you're an
television, gets
insomniac, it's not a bad way to go.
it's not, but you probably won't get through to the parts I'm talking about. So let's clear up a couple misnomers that are out there. All of you out there, God bless you. When my house first burned down, you want to give clothing, you want to do things, etc. But for those of you out there, first step is you have a portion in almost every policy, including even today, I found out in the FAIR plan, called additional living expenses. That right now, more than anything else, is the important part of your policy that will take care of Wednesday night, not hiring Scott and rebuilding your pad. And Scott, you may want to know more about what additional living expenses covers.
What does additional living expenses cover? And,
Well, I'm glad.
face it, right now you're probably couch surfing on a friend's house or you're in a hotel.
But
So
let's
these are
talk.
additional
Let's talk.
expenses.
Let's talk about that. In your policy, I'm going to use a simple figure. Let's assume your top line policy or your structure, coverage A, very simple. So when you say you're insured for $1 million, it might be 2 million. Let's use 1 million. That is your top line policy. You have a coverage out of it, and you have possessions, and you have other things. But the most important thing is a coverage down the line right now to you called additional living expenses. Now, Scott,
Okay,
if you
hold on,
have
hold on. So you said the top line, you calling it $1 million. That one category is for the architecture and construction costs when you actually build, right?
no, it's not. It's actually your coverage you have on the dwelling. By the way, for everybody out there, and I don't want to go too far out of order here, okay? When you get money, if you get the $1 million for your structure, you don't have to rebuild. You could spend the million on going to Bora Bora, which would be weird, but everybody's got their own thing, right? You could spend that money on anything that you want. You are not required to use that money to rebuild. You're not required to use that money for anything at all. However, everyone out there, and my kids were smaller when it happened in 2007, most of you want to have a roof over your head and need immediate relief. So let's cover additional living expenses. In most insurance policies, if you have $1 million of coverage, Scott, additional living expenses is about 30% extra of that top line, or about
So I get,
$300,000.
okay, so
Now,
I get, what do I get to use it for?
I'm going to tell you, but thank you for asking. So that means let's just pretend you're couch surfing or you're staying in a hotel. If you're couch surfing at a friend's house, you can't reimburse your friend for it, but it does pay for the meals for yourself and everything else that you have to go out and do immediately. And in fact, immediately, you could call your insurance company and get a check probably for $10 to $12,000 immediately out of additional living expenses without hurting your other coverage, so you immediately have money in the bank. Now, if you have to go stay in a hotel because you've been displaced, if you have to buy gas for the RV that you're staying in, you submit that under that coverage, additional living expenses. There's a catch here, and you have to understand this. This is only good for 6 to 24 months from the time this happens. So this is the first coverage immediately. So if you have to go stay, not at the suite at the Ritz-Carlton, but at the Ritz-Carlton at $800 a night, it's covered. If you have to dine out at the Ritz-Carlton, it's probably covered immediately and now, and you could get a check now to start replacing some of your stuff. Now, there's a lot of other misinformation out there about the press, and this is going to be shocking to you, Scott, because most of the press is liberal.
I'm shocked. Oh, I was just going to comment. If you're trying to find a hotel room and you can't find one because the homeless are being stored there, that's another issue. You're going to have to fight for those
But
hotel
you
rooms
can
yourself.
go to the highest, you have the right to go to almost any hotel you want at almost any price, literally in the first week or so, and get a room and get a
Mhm.
suite. This is emergency money. And you have
Yeah,
about 300. Go
and
ahead.
since you know the process takes longer, right? You're suggesting that people are going to stay in a hotel, figure out what's up, which end is up, get that emergency check or whatever that they need to right away. But then the next thing they do is what? Look for something that they can live in for a year because they're going to be a year to rebuild.
At least
If
here's
they
what you
decide to
can
do
do.
that way.
So, with the press is misleading is they talk about rent gouging. I'm not suggesting anybody rent gouge, but let me give a couple other things that people don't think of. When your house burns down, and let's just say your mortgage is 3,500 a month, your mortgage does not go away. Now, the
Okay,
bank
so
may
if you have to
offer
go rent a
emergency.
house, you rent a house at $6,000 a month to replace to live in the you talked about it before, but you may not have mentioned it yet, is to live in the same level that you're accustomed to. So you go out and you rent a house that's basically like the one that burned down. But don't forget, not only are you paying that $6,000 a month, but now you still have to pay your $3,500 a month mortgage or whatever it is.
Correct, but it's important to note a couple things. If your mortgage is 3,500, don't worry about that you're renting a house or an apartment for $6,000. It's not the dollar figure that the insurance company is worried about. And again, disclaimer, you've got to submit and talk to your agent. And for everybody out there that bought it online from Mexico, this is why it's good to have an insurance agent, but get a hold of your insurance company. So your mortgage is 3,500 a month. That does not mean you have to go out under additional living expenses and rent something equivalent to your mortgage. What it means is this. Step one, get your check for 10 grand. Get reimbursed immediately for the expenses like hotel room, food, laundry, gas, everything else. And then the
Car
correct
rental, because both your cars burned
car,
down.
right, car rental, anything you want. This is 300 grand extra you don't want to leave on the table. Now, only criteria it's got to be equivalent to or less in this, and it can be in the same area. So that doesn't mean for those of you living in Pacific Palisades and Altadena, you don't have to go look in Lancaster. You are entitled to stay in the same area, and there's no specific circle. So if you're in Pacific Palisades and need to rent a place for 8 grand a month, that could come out of your additional living expenses. And that can happen like now. And I want to know another trick why instead of competing with all the other renters that are out there, you could also talk to a real estate agent who may already have a house for sale that's vacant for the time being, that's not even considered to be up for rent. That owner may be overseas, that owner may be somewhere else. Contact the agent and tell them, hey, the guy's current mortgage is 5 grand a month. My insurance company will pay 7,500 and it's maybe unfurnished, but you can immediately move in and the insurance company will pay for it. So, trick one, food, clothing, shelter. Your food will be paid for while you're displaced, whether you were forced out by evacuation, partially damaged, or totally burned out. Your clothing can immediately be replaced with a check and by turning the receipts in under additional living expenses. Do not use your possession coverage, which I will get to in a second, because then you will be.
So that possession coverage is that $1 million number that you've been using, right? So you
No,
don't use it out of that. You use the 300,000, which is in addition to it.
so thank you for bringing me back to the white light. Here it is. The $1 million I'm using is your structure coverage. Your possession coverage, your coverage B, is usually about 75% of your structure coverage. It all sounds like a lot of money, but it burns quickly. So that's about another $750,000, but you're trying to replace everything that you own. I'm gonna get to that because you wanna work on that next.
So you're basically talking about the contents of the house.
Yes,
That's your,
correct. Contents,
so
okay?
all
Now,
those clothes, all the furniture, all the cars, all the whatever you have in your garage, your Christmas decorations, everything's included in that.
now here's your first instinct. Your first instinct is I found a place to live that the insurance company is paying for. So I'm going to go out and go to my insurance company and use my possession coverage to buy all new stuff, as George Carlin calls it, right? Because now I've got a home. You literally have no bed, no couch, no television, right? So you want to go to the insurance company and use your possession coverage. This is a trick that I learned that when I wrote the article this week, the actual insurance agents were surprised that I thought of it. I want everybody to listen clearly to this because this will bring an extra couple hundred grand into your pocket. And you heard me correctly. Instead of going out and replacing your house or your rental with permanent stuff, I want
Furniture
you to
like
go
that.
where probably none of us have rarely stepped before, to paraphrase Star Trek. And that's I want you to rent to own. Oh, that we don't do that. This stuff's overpriced. It's weird. It might be. But what we did is we went to a rent to own place, got a big screen TV, a couch, beds, everything, as much as you could at rent to own. And yes, the television set, which could have cost $1,000, might cost 3,000. Not your money. It comes out of your living expense that you use it or lose it. We had it delivered to our home without touching our content coverage. Now, the other trick is it's rent to own for a year. Scott, guess what happens after a year?
They don't want it back.
Nobody wants it back. The insurance company doesn't want it. The rental company doesn't want it. It's used so you get to keep it without touching your content coverage.
Okay, so you're replacing your furniture, which normally would come out of the content. So this is just a little tip of the trade, right? You're basically saying, hey, look, we're going to go after it as part of that $300,000 number rather than the $750,000
Yes.
possession content number. So you're maximizing your policy. Now,
Yes.
if you were pushing that $300,000 number already because you couldn't find a cheap place to rent that was comparable and all this other stuff, then you might still end up pushing it back. But you're saying basically, no, you tend to not use that whole 300,000, so take advantage of it because you only have 12 months
Correct.
to
You
do it.
won't use it because if your structure was $1 million, that's 300,000. Most people out there are insured for like 2 million. So that, depending where they live, it really is, it's a relative, it's really hard to burn that up. I mean, if you think about it, if your rent was 10,000 a month for 12 months, that's 120,000. And if you equip it with $100,000 of rental stuff, including appliances, it's a lot of stuff, Scott.
Okay. So you're basically not you're encouraging people to make sure that they use all of their coverages to their best ability. And this is a little tip of the trick of the trade that you learn. Only
It's
because you want
important because you lose that coverage. And again, for you will lose that part of the coverage is only good for about 6 to 12 months. Do you see what I mean?
well, we already know the building process is going to take longer than that. What happens?
Well, let's cover that in 1 second, okay? So the first thing for today I want people to do is go to your additional living expense coverage, rent your furniture, don't worry about the price of whatever, okay? And I want you to understand your mortgage will be paid out of your normal cash flow. Now let's talk about the second thing you should do immediately that quite candidly I've talked to a couple state assembly and senate people about speeding up this week. But you have a mortgage for $3,500 a month. And chances are about $800 of that mortgage is an impound account. So the next thing you do on a Monday morning, and in LA it's hard, but file immediately, and we're working on relief, is file for a reassessment because your $2 million home is now worth $6. And in fact, it's not even worth the lot. I hate to break it to you because you're going to have to get it cleared, which could come out of additional living expenses. That's going to cost you $50,000 to $75,000. And for everybody out there, don't be shocked. Your property will be red tagged, in spite of what Gavin says, by the EPA because you've had metals burn on your site. You have pollution on your site. It will take 6 months to get that clear, but get your property reappraised will get you a little bit of mortgage relief. And understand
Well, it's
that
not
when
really
well,
mortgage relief, right? It's not, you're talking impound account. Basically what that is the money that you're giving the bank for them to pay the property taxes for you. And so
correct,
let's get the property taxes lowered right away so that
right
you
away,
can minimize your impact because the property is worth a lot less.
correct. And what you're also going to find too is that the mortgage companies, the banks, they might give you relief, but you will still owe that mortgage somewhere down the line. Even if they say you don't have to pay it right now, it still accrues against your balance. But I don't want to go too deep in this. I want to go into some other little tricks here, if you don't mind. Okay. So get
Okay,
your
so the
property tax.
first trick is rent to own. The next trick is get your property reassessed by the tax assessor of the county right away. Okay. Tip number three, what's that? I
First
mean,
off,
these,
there are going to be a lot of people out there offering public agencies, special assessors that will want it, or accountants that will want to charge you for doing stuff. You do not need them. Okay. It is a whole industry of people coming out who want to say everything I'm telling you. And look at me, Scott, I'm not that bright. I did myself because it's not that hard to figure out. And normally your agent will walk you through it. Do not pay a public type person or the state to do it for you. Your whole goal of this game, 1 second here, is to maximize your coverage in all categories. So we've covered one of the downstream categories for today, additional living. I'm going to keep repeating it because people don't get it. Then you have your coverage A, which is your property itself. There will be a claims adjuster coming out to see you. That will take a week to 2 weeks at best. That claims adjuster does not work for your insurance company. They're hired for gun. House next door might be Allstate. Your house might be State Farm. Do not contact a contract person to come out. Let the insurance company send one of their contract people to you
yeah,
because that will help you.
you say they don't work for the insurance company, but they do. They're just not employees. They're
Correct.
hired
But
guns.
my point is, you hear this pitch from these guys that come out of the woodwork, right? That we could do it better. We're only charging $5,000. We'll charge you a percentage of your claim, right? These are
And
the
they're negotiating for you and trying to help you capture all the intricacies of the insurance company and the policy, which you don't know anything about. And basically, you're giving them the information for free, and you're giving them better information. So tune
right. And they're
into.
called public adjusters, right? And the public adjusters is a scam. They will charge you to do what you could do yourself. The insurance companies are very fair with you. Forget the condition, forget all the political hyperbole for a second. You have a policy, they will pay that policy. Okay. Now, a couple things to remember. When they go out and look at your house, I'm staying with the structure right now. Okay.
This is the $1 million number, right?
The $1 million number. They're going to come out and look at the house. Okay. Remember also, you have additional coverage, and I'm not going to talk about code coverage. You'll come later when you try to rebuild, but you have something called landscaping. What
Oh,
people
unless
forget,
it's just grass.
no, well, you have bushes, you have trees.
Yeah.
Most people have,
Well,
okay.
you
Now
definitely
here's,
want to include that in the number.
well, that's a separate declaration. That is in addition to you're $1 million.
I mean, it's not part of the contents and it's not part of the million, it's over and above.
It's your grounds. You have a separate policy on that. And you could declare like a State Farm, for example. And we had a lot of exotic trees on our property, not exotic, big tall palms, and they were exotic to us. They'll pay you, there's a limit on it, but it's $500 per plant or shrub. And you say, well, I didn't pay $500. It was petunias. Well, that's what they say it would cost to replace it, like your fender if your car got damaged. So make sure that you maximize the landscaping portion, which is separate coverage, because that is not part of the structure, that's part of the grounds.
Interesting that they don't include it in the same number.
No,
And,
it's
and I
not part of the
and I
structure.
take it the adjuster does not offer it, you have to ask.
It's not the adjuster may or may not, but remember this, okay? The adjuster that comes out, it's up to you. And I want to stress this really importantly. I'm going to do this a couple times. You have control of your own fate. Don't wait for a public adjuster or any contract adjuster to tell you, you tell them your house burned down or was damaged. That adjuster, good, bad, or evil, doesn't know what was there before. And you don't have to prove it to them. You just have to be reasonable. You can't say, well, mon frère, I had exotic rose bushes that I imported from Paris that were worth $1,000 a piece. They'll go, too bad anyway. We give you $500 a rose bush, but I'll take your word for it that you had 10 bushes there, and we'll give you another $5,000. We
Yeah,
had
yeah, I'm
40-foot.
sorry, if it's a French rose bush, it's probably only worth about $100, not $500.
They'll still give you
Okay, so
500.
let me recap a little bit. We got four pots of money we're talking about. We're talking about the main structure pot of money. We're talking about the possessions. That's all the stuff that was inside. We're talking about your living expenses while this whole mess is going on and getting fixed. And now we got the grounds pot of money that you can get for your landscaping and other issues, driveway, whatever.
It also includes, by the way, things like your. But remember, when you're in shock, when you get some of these adjusters on the phone, I recommend you do it yourself. They're gonna. Most of us, you're in shock. You were just put in the middle of a movie that you didn't plan to be on when you woke up that morning. Look,
Oh yeah,
no
yeah.
one ever. I
And
didn't
you don't,
expect.
and you haven't even read the script yet.
Right, you haven't even read the script yet, and you are going to have to mentally, for a number of times, walk through the inside of your home and walk through the outside of your home. You don't notice
You need to put this in an outline form on Twitter, on your social
I'm
media.
doing that in a series of articles, right? Tonight, I'm getting the chance to talk about it because I realize a lot of people are like, oh my God. That's why I focused to this first week on living expense.
Yeah.
Okay. It's almost like a 12-step program.
Well, yeah, we're trying to get something where, like you say, they're in the middle of this movie now, and they're trying to learn the words of the script, and we're force feeding it down them right now, and they're kind of like, "Wow, what? Slow down. Let me write this
Okay.
down."
So what I want you to do is remember, you will get your cash will come in chunks. The first thing to do is take care of your immediate family's needs. Don't go
Okay.
to the food banks if you have insurance. Call your insurance company. They'll send you a $10,000 check, a $20,000 check to get you rocking and rolling. Step
Right.
two is
So if all your savings was in that mattress that got burned up, and you don't have any money in the bank, the insurance company will cut you a check and cut your check right away.
no, doesn't matter if you do have money in the bank. And by the way, you bring up a
I
very
know,
good
but
point.
you don't have anything else to rely on. The insurance company will step up for you.
Yeah, they'll step up anyway. And by the way, you bring up a good point. The whole idea here, my friends, is to conserve your cash and conserve your coverage. You're going to say, wow, I got $1 million. It burns quickly. You're going to say, I'm okay. I got 100,000 in the bank. It goes quickly. Everything that you've taken 30, 40, 50, 20, 70 years to build is now gone. And you will be amazed once you start adding it up how fast you'll burn through cash. So, Scott, my whole point is conserve cash. Use the insurance company's cash. Don't take it out of your savings. Your mortgage company may not negotiate with you. They may say, dude, you got to keep paying the 3,500 a month.
Right. And the property tax, even though you may get it adjusted, they're not going to have that money reflected right away. That adjustment's going to appear in refund check or whatever 8, 10, 12 months later. And we're talking the county of LA, Karen Bass. We're talking about the state of California, and it's likely to be longer. I mean, eventually you'll get the money back, but you're still going to have to pay it up front, or else you're just delinquent on your property taxes.
Correct. So the whole theme of the game right now, some of you work from home today, your office is gone. The name of the game is conserve cash. So let's start with that. Now, oddly enough, one of the next things what you remember most is the structure, right? That is the house that I lived in. And that is the first thing that comes to mind. And you maximize your structure. Structure kind of is what it is for most of you, okay? But I want to spend some time tonight, Scott, talking about possessions. Because if your house was insured for $1 million, your second cover of possessions is about 750,000. And you're looking at one of the few clowns that maximize that coverage. Most people don't.
You start writing that list down now of what you had in the house, and because you're going to remember it as you come along, as you get a break in the middle of the night, you're going to remember things. Start keeping a list because
Well,
they pay
here's
you
a
based.
couple. Well, they do and they don't. Here's a couple tips here. Okay. Never lie, obviously. And if you own something extraordinary, you would have declared it. So they're going to ask you to take a look, for example, and I want you to cut a vision in your head. They're going to say, well, look at that cabinet. You go, okay, I can see the cabinet in the living room. And beside that cabinet, there were two pictures. And on that cabinet, I had some really expensive jeans there I bought 10 years ago. I'm doing this for a reason. Okay. Now, if those pictures, you can have to be reasonable as to what's in there. Now, here's something insurance companies don't like me to say. Shocking. Don't send pictures of your stuff ever to the insurance company.
Really,
Yeah. Why do you think they want pictures?
so they can justify how little to pay you.
Because they're going to look at something, like let's say my microphone, and they're going to say, well, that microphone is pretty ragged, Netter. It's not worth 250 bucks, which is what I paid for it at Best Buy. They're going to say it's only worth 60 bucks because look at all the dents that are in it. So when it's
What do you do
destroyed,
with your microphone? Beat up that microphone. So yes, they'll use it more against you than for you, where you could just sit there and say, "Hey, a microphone."
now the
Hey,
first thing you want to understand is that when I painted that picture, the insurance company pays by category. So I want to walk through this because your possession money will come in chunks and will come like your structure money does. But Scott, I'm going to take a little bit to walk through how possession money is paid.
do
Your
we get a
structure,
Delta smelt possession, category, special
yeah,
category for
well,
Delta smelt?
here's what to understand. If you're a pianist, okay, and Dick said, well, I had a bunch of automotive tools in the garage. They would go, well, that's a little bit weird. I could see you having $100,000 piano, but why would you have a lot of auto tools? Or vice versa. And I get it. Some of you out there are going to go, I repair cars and I play piano. Great. But understand a couple things.
So are they going to pay you back? Are they going to pay you back on the piano based on how good of a player you are, and they're going to audition you?
Well, yeah, you got to demonstrate in front of them, Scott. We got to do that. No, here's the thing. Things like a piano, depending on the type of piano it is, there's a depreciation mark to each thing. So remember, you have clothes. You may have had a tuxedo. Clothes depreciate at 100%. meaning that it's logical for me, being in politics and being a professional. I have a lot of suits. And I may have paid $1,000, not that I did, but let's say 800 bucks for those suits. But those suits depreciate to really the amount of clothes I have really aren't worth that much because they depreciate rapidly. So get from your insurance company who will give you the categories and how much they depreciate and what they pay per category. Critically important because you may have had a ton of clothes. Don't exhaust yourself. The ton of clothes that you have isn't really going to pay a lot. You want to get the most you can for it. And they don't pay per category, they just kind of assign it. Now, when you have tools, Scott, you might have an $850 sander in your garage. You know what it's worth?
I give what?
250 bucks. Because most of the time, the max they'll pay per tool is 250 bucks. So you can tell them, you could take that hammer you have, again, don't lie, but be realistic and say, this was a hammer I had. It was $100 hammer. Yeah, maybe you don't remember. You're not going to have any receipts, okay? So that hammer was $100 hammer, and that sander might be 800 bucks, but they're going to pay you 250 bucks for it. Tools depreciate, for example, but at a lower rate. Jewelry you had, not extraordinary jewelry. If you have right now advice for you, your mate's wedding ring, get a what's called a rider on it. If you have a $30,000 piece of jewelry, it will not be covered unless you have a rider on it. Okay,
Well,
but
you're
for
telling that for
normal,
the people who haven't lost their homes or their
correct.
jewelry. But yes, it makes it a whole lot easier for them if there's a rider on it, because then it theoretically has been identified and appraised, or at least a value set.
No,
But
those
you know,
paintings on the
tools.
wall.
So dumb question. Let's say that I got that $800 power tool, and I've got a picture of it. I've got a receipt for it. Will they still only pay you? Let's say it's 10 years old, but hey, it was in great shape. Yeah, are
They'll
they
pay
going
you
to pay?
250. They'll pay you 250 bucks.
And that's kind of the max for per
Yeah, but
item
that's what
basis.
I'm saying. Before you start don't turn in receipts. Don't you are allowed to get, you don't need a public adjuster to do this. This is where the biggest scams take place. Because the public adjuster will say, oh, you have Mr. Piotr, you have $750,000 insurance, and you know what? If I get you $600,000, you could pay me a 10,000 600. You're going to pay me a $10,000 commission. Now, he might come to you, or she, let's be fair, crooks come in both genders, Scott. And she might come to you, I'm going to use a woman in this case, and say, hey, you know, we have $750,000 of insurance. We're going to get you 800,000 for possessions. No, they're not. You can get it, you want to maximize up to the cap. You can't go over your cap. But yes, you heard correctly. You will get a list of categories, depreciation, and the maximum payout per category. Now, let me stop you 1 second. If I repair cars in my garage, I know it's not legal, but let's pretend in LA I was doing that. Okay? And
And no, no,
that's
wait a
how I
minute.
made,
I've got a 55 Chevy pickup, and I built it myself, and I've got a ton of tools in my garage. So I'm not repairing them illegally in my garage. It's a hobby for me. And I've got
that
a
may
lot of
fall
tools.
into, and you can call your agent, that may fall for your 55 Chevy into a different category, because that may fall into a category where you're fixing your collectible. So your
Yeah.
tools were an investment for your collectible. I'm not here to be an insurance expert. I'm telling you, as you walk through in your mind what you owe, you want to look at the categories and put that object that you remember in the category where you will maximize your payout. Now, let me
Okay.
go to paintings, for example. Okay. A painting on your wall, if in my cases, we owned a lot of Wyland, that famous guy in Laguna Beach. We loved his stuff. We would
Lots of
spend
whales.
20 with the whales on the wall. we spent about 2,500 on some paintings. Now, I went to the insurance company and go, we owned Wylands. And by the way, on a quick side note, you don't have receipts, but you probably have witnesses if they ever debate with you. People will walk through your home and may not remember it's a Wyland, but yeah, I saw a picture of a whale on Netter's wall. Okay, that counts as a witness. All right.
Now, is that better than a photograph?
Yes,
Why?
because again, they would look at that Wyland and go, "Hey, you Yahoo, that's print number 9,643 and is worth $6 because we looked it up." I'm not expected to remember that was print 9,643. I'm expected simply to remember it was a Wyland.
And it was original as far as you were concerned.
Sure. My point is, it's not a dolly. Don't get carried away and saying, well, that wasn't a Wyland as I remember it, Scott. That was a Picasso. Well, in that case, you should have had a writer to go with it. Okay? Got it? So it's probably better not to have pictures. If you do have something like we all have stuff, I'm looking for, I'll pick on this box. So I have this box. This is probably not a very valuable box, but roll with me for a second.
It's a very nice box.
It's a very nice box, okay? Now, if I had a lot of these boxes, all you really have to do, and do it yourself, is go to the internet and find boxes that kind of sort of look like this and attach them to the spreadsheet or the computer program with a picture of the box. And I wouldn't, not that I'm telling you to do this, but don't go find the cheapest box on Amazon. You want to find probably the most expensive box on eBay that happens to look like this box. Because again, you max out in my mystical thing at $750,000. Get his max out that 750. Don't use it immediately again. You can go use it and say, hey man, I want to replace all my couches and TV. Do it out of additional living expenses immediately.
Okay, so if you think that you're getting close to the 750, your possession number, then obviously anything that you can move into your living expenses, which is only good for 12 months anyway, your $300,000 number.
Start with your living expenses.
It's a
Rent
better
as
way
much
to
as
go.
you can. Right.
So
Start.
you're painting a roadmap for these guys on how to distribute their assets into the different categories to maximize the amount of money they're going to get from the insurance company, which they will need to replace all that stuff if they choose to do so. Okay.
Let's go to
That
something
sounds
else
good.
too.
Sounds reasonable, Mr. Mike.
Thank you. You also have another clause in your policy, and I don't remember, that has to do with clearing the disaster. Most of you, again, I get it. You want to rise from the ashes to rise again. Okay? And you're going to take money out of your bank account, or you're going to run to Scott the architect, and Scott's going to contact Willie the clearer or something because you don't know anybody that clears sites. And Scott might send you somebody and you'll pay to get it done. You actually have a portion of your policy, and I forget what it's called, it will be additional coverage. Submit it always to the insurance company first to have your property cleared, not by two dudes in a truck, even if they're Republican, but by official people that do this for a living. Because remember, you'll probably have to have your foundation removed. You'll have to have a lot of, quote, garbage removed. We had to have our chimney blasted out because the chimney always rises. We had to have our fountains blasted out because the fountain still stayed existed. But there's professional services that come from a separate portion of your coverage to clear your property. That includes clearing the landscaping,
So
et
that's
cetera, et
assuming
cetera.
that the foundation's not reusable and that you're not going to
Yep.
rebuild it exact the way that it was. And not all fires are so hot that the foundation's unusable. But as your experience was, the fire was so hot that the foundation was unusable and had to be cleared anyway,
I
along
hit the
with the
flashpoint.
melted coppers and other metals that are in the building that are hazmat now because they're in the dirt and they have to be cleaned up.
And by the
So
way, I want to,
is that a fifth pot of money that we're talking about?
yeah,
Now we
it's
had
another pot of money. And by
landscaping,
the way, I
now
want to recommend, yeah, if your foundation you think is usable, you don't have to reuse it because again, the other pot of money will clear it out for you. Do you see what I mean?
but then
You
you
could
also have to pay to replace it or rebuild it if you're trying to build something back to the same way that it was. Let me tell
you
you from
do,
a building code standpoint, if you go in there and keep the foundation and then rebuild on top of that, the building department generally won't require you to upgrade that footing because you're reusing it. They will require you to upgrade everything else that you build, but the footing itself, they likely are not going to, and with the political pressure that's not going to be on them for these fires, probably aren't going to. But my guess is, I don't, this is just an educated guess. I have no experience in it. But my guess is that you're going to find that 50% of the footings are probably unusable. And the other 50% you don't want to use because it's not, if I'm going to rebuild the house, it's going to be custom. I want to move the living room over here. I want to move this. I want to do this. I want to, and the footing and the foundations are not going to be very usable if you're making
you have
any
partial
change.
or you have partial or smoke damage, right? You're absolutely right. If you've had severe fire damage to your house, again, above my pay grade, which is zero, by the way, because I do this for free, but what the hell? So everything is literally above my
I
pay
say
grade.
public service.
Yes. Um, I want to stress again, just to make sure to take these pots of money. Also, most of you have code coverage and you don't know that. So the code coverage is usually the $1 million I'm talking about. So you go to look at your house, you had $1 million of coverage. Your possession coverage was 750. Okay. Now your coverage actually will pay up to 25% more. So you really have 1.2 million to rebuild. Wait, there's more. When you go to rebuild, okay, and they say, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Piotr, the codes have changed. The roof you had before that you put up in the 50s, because it's LA, now must be made of certain kinds of feathers that are guaranteed to reflect the sun and have no oil-based activity in them at all, and whatever, which actually they're called Title 9 roofs, I believe, or Title 8s. So that's a code upgrade, and you have additional code coverage when you go to rebuild. But
It's
Scott, I don't want to go in too deep in that tonight.
it's Title 24. So,
Title
so you know,
24. I
that's
add
the
them all
energy.
up. Add them all up together. I was probably
Yeah,
right.
they come close. Yeah,
I mean,
13,
you could all,
24.
but
What?
but again, don't get ahead of yourself. Immediately, what you want to do is start putting cash in the bank. Also, the laws have changed, and we'll talk about tax ramifications later. But what I want to really get out of tonight's show, and I do this as a public service because I've been through this. There's good news and there's bad news. You want to know what some of the bad news is, Scott?
Hey, give me the bad news first.
Your house burned down. You
I
know
already
what the
heard
good
that.
news is?
I'm
You're
alive.
still, yep, you're still here to watch the show and read the articles, okay? So
I'm still. Hey, wait. You're telling me that the script writer hasn't written me out of the play yet. I'm still here.
correct. You're still
I
there.
haven't
There were
filed for.
29 people, God bless them, that lost their lives. Never defend yourself against a fire. Fire is undefeated. Now, what I want you to do here, for everyone out there that knows somebody, and again, I'm not making money, I'm not pitching, I'm not selling. If you know somebody, I will be happy to give them tips for free. Do not hire people to do what I'm saying. I did it on my own. I've talked to a number of agents. The insurance companies have resources that you've been paying for. Scott, every time you scream paying your insurance, there's a lot of screaming once a year in my house when that bill comes due and when we put money in that escrow account. You've been paying for that expertise. Go to my X feed. You
That's
can't
at
see.
Netter Mike at Netter
Right.
Mike. Next feed.
And my email, outraged at rebuildcalifornia.com, is on there. Please let me help anybody you know. If you've been displaced, living in an RV, if you have smoke damage, if your house is burned down, forget the political hyperbole for a second. I've been through this. And what's fascinating to me about this situation, most of us, we've lost a parent. We have a common life experience, as I say often. It's not that often, and I know 40,000 people sounds like a lot that have been displaced. There's 10 million in LA County. Okay? You're not going to meet a lot of people who houses burned down. Scott, when you stop at the next card store and look for cards, you're going to find sympathy cards, wedding cards. They even have divorce cards. But you know what there aren't? Hallmark cards for your house burning down. There aren't.
I'm sorry your house burned down.
So there
There's,
is,
there's a coupon on the back. Come stay on my couch. 2 nights free. After that, we charge.
there you go. So for most people, it's awkward and they don't know what to do. And the reply I get all the time when I tell this to people in 2007, my house burned down, they go, "Oh my God, I'm sorry." I go, "Dude,
Yeah,
it
like somebody in the
happened."
family died, right?
Right. I get it. It was traumatic when it happened. My family never spent a night without a roof over their head. We recovered financially. By the way, we had a really big garage and I didn't have to clean it that year, Scott. So there's an upside to that, right? Um,
If you had
so
tools, you
so here's the thing, everyone out there, listen to me, please. Pass this information on every segment. I get cut off in a lot of political segments in radio because I get it. It's a short segment. They want to talk up a little hyperbole. Let me occupy your inbox with that along with Scott. But right now, I want you to focus not on the 1 out of 10 that don't have insurance. We can't help them right now. But for the 9 out of 10 that do have insurance, I, myself, we're here to help with a conversation to maximize and leverage what has taken place to you. Scott, we're at 7:27. I know I've talked a lot. Shocking. But give me some final thoughts here.
Mike, first of all, thanks for sharing your experience. I know it was hard earned and you went through a lot of pain to get it. And it's really nice of you to share with everybody. And I know that for those people that were frantically taking notes, you can obviously replay this show, but you're also putting together a series of articles. You've already done one. And so if you can post those on your website, which I think you already said you were going to do, or go to the X feed at Netter Mike.
And
And
they're on LinkedIn at Mike Netter and Facebook and all my groups. So I'm posting them all over the place.
So yeah, go there to one of his social sites and download that as just a piece of friendly advice. He's not an attorney; he doesn't play one on TV, uh, and we know he's a genius. But it's a hard fought deal that you've earned and learned all this information. And I didn't know there were five different pots of money, and it would make sense that if you had five pots, you'd want to make sure you were maximizing every one and not overrunning one and leaving one untouched. And because, like you say, it adds up. You go through the money quickly. Bongino actually had a fire and his show, and he's sitting there saying, some of those intangibles, like, 10 years later, you sit there and go, "Hey, I know I'm going to go get that baseball card. My mom, oh, wait, that was part of the fire, and oh, it's not there anymore." And it's going to be painful for a long time. And you're going to continue having those, moments where you're kind of like, gee, I'd like to go get that, but it's not there anymore. You can't go get it. So you've got to move on. God's still here. God's still gracious in spite of Newsom, in spite of Karen Bass, and we're trying to give practical how-tos, which I really appreciate, and I hope everybody else does too. So, Mike, give me your parting advice for people. Besides the
My
fact,
parting
thank
advice is this: don't depend on the government. Don't depend on FEMA. We'll go into that in a later show, or SBA. They're not going to help.
and don't
You,
depend on Karen Bass or Kevin or Governor Newsom. I mean, what a joke, right?
right. I get it. You're angry. There are reasons that your house burned down beyond your control or you would damage. But here's the thing: you control your fate. It's up to you to maximize the resources that you have. And we're here to help you do that. We'll get to the political rhetoric later. We will stop this from happening again, but you are empowered with the power that you have to make your immediate situation better. Don't need the Salvation Army, don't need Karen Bass, don't need Scott and Mike. Certainly, we don't need Gavin Newsom, but you have the opportunity to take your own fate in your hands. Listen to me, who's gone through it before. Listen to Scott, who's built things before. We're here to help. God bless everybody out there, especially God bless. Heavens may shine down upon the 29 that lost their lives. But for all of us that have survived, let's take fate into our own hands. We'll be back next week. California Free Radio. You know what? We are still standing. Scott,
Yes.
thank you and good night.
California Free Radio. We're behind the blue curtain, letting truth be known. So check in here next Wednesday at 6:30. We'll be here.
By your inbox.